Hi, I'm Paul Edwards, author of the Mourners Woods books, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Tonight I'm reading Famous Monsters of Filmland 1966 Yearbook. Oh, yeah. I thought some of you might enjoy flipping through this vintage magazine with me. Together, let's see if it's really the best issue ever. Okay, Famous Monsters of Filmland's 1966 Yearbook is the best issue ever. But if you're not familiar, Famous Monsters of Filmland, about every fourth or fifth issue, they would say best issue ever. So there's nothing new there. So 1966, this was right after the first wave of monster kids, where classic monsters were all the craze. That started in 1957 with the advent of shock theater that introduced a whole new generation of kids to the classic monsters of the 30s and 40s on late night TV. And the first wave of monster kids ran until 1965. So when this came out in 66, classic monsters were still very in vogue and very popular. And of course we have Lon Chaney Sr. as the Phantom of the Opera on the cover. Get your monster kicks from this 1966 yearbook. There was a song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66. There's Evelyn Ankers, and of course Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. Oh, that's a good picture of Lon Chaney Jr. as the Mummy. I like that one. The Mummy movies may not have been the best Universal movies of all, but I really, really liked the Jack Pierce makeup for the Mummy. The way he portrayed the Mummy with his makeup on Lon Chaney Jr. was great. Here we have Lon Chaney Sr. from the sadly lost movie London After Midnight. Okay, so what are we getting in this issue? The Gastrological Horror Scope. Oh, I get it because it's ghastly. The Laurie Story. The Prehistoric Story. Lon Chaney Shall Not Die. Tales of Terror. Oh, John Carradine. Return of the Fly. Okay, I have something to say about that. The Lone Stranger. Oh, it's an article on Glenn Strange. Okay. Dante's Inferno. Okay. All right, let's get right to it. Yikes. Yeah, here they have the H. See, gastrological. See, that makes sense. When they have it here, gastrological, that has to do with food. That's digestion. This is the gas that they meant. Okay. Ooh. So, Hammer Studios, of course, had big success with their first Dracula movie, released here in North America as Horror of Dracula. But when they went to make a sequel, Christopher Lee didn't want to come back and play Dracula again. But they did get Peter Cushing back to play Professor Van Helsing, and he was up against a new boss vampire. So, for years and years and years, this was the only movie that you would ever see with Van Helsing, but no Dracula. But then they made one a few years ago. They made another Van Helsing movie with no Dracula. So I can't go around saying that anymore. But I could for years say this was the only movie you're ever going to see with Van Helsing, but no Dracula. This is really good, though. This is Hammer at its most Hammer-ish. Oh. Okay, Frankenstein 1970 is not a 1970 movie. It's a 1958 movie set in the near future. And Boris Karloff is back, but this time he's playing Baron Frankenstein, not the monster. It's interesting because people liked the title Frankenstein 1970 so much that it influenced future movie titles. And this is where we got the title for Godzilla 1985 and the title for Dracula 2000. They're both tributes to the title Frankenstein 1970. Not necessarily to the movie, but just to the title. House of Usher, the first and probably the best of the Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe movies, with Vincent Price playing Roderick Usher. When Hammer Studios made Curse of Frankenstein, their first Frankenstein movie in the late 1950s, they were deathly afraid that Universal Studios would sue them if their Frankenstein monster makeup looked anything like Boris Karloff's famous makeup done by Jack Pierce in the 1931 Frankenstein. So they made a completely different looking monster. Didn't even try to make it look like the Boris Karloff Frankenstein. That's why Christopher Lee here looks so different from the Frankenstein we're used to. Yikes. The Mummy is actually my favorite Hammer film of all. It's so creepy, so creepy. And it has Hammer's two biggest stars, Christopher Lee as the Mummy, Peter Cushing as Banning. Oh, this is from a more obscure movie, Blood of the Vampire. You can see this movie on my other channel, because now I have two channels going. I have this channel, the Mourners Woods channel, and then separately I have All Night Spook Show. And I have Blood of the Vampire up on that. You can see the whole thing uncut. Yikes. The Lost World. Yeah. This was kind of a shame because when they went to remake The Lost World in 1960, you know, everyone got excited that they were going to have another round of those great stop-motion dinosaurs from the old version. And instead what you got was, you know, living lizards with a couple of appliances glued onto them. Like, you know, one would have a horn and one would have fins on the back or fangs or something. And they were living lizards that they would send out there to just stomp around on a miniature set. That's a Forrest J. Ackerman joke for you. Not even a pun, just a joke for you. Is there an usher in the house? Okay. I guess it is a pun. All right. Oh, the mole people. Yeah. You know, when you see a picture like this, everyone's looking at the monster. But sometimes if you look at the actor that's posing, if it's not a frame from the film, if it's just a publicity picture, sometimes they're kind of phoning it in. She doesn't look very convincing there. Of course, I'll leave it to you to decide if the mole person looks convincing. Oh, here's upcoming movies. So Famous Monsters would announce upcoming genre movies. Sometimes they were exactly right. Sometimes they were wrong, but it wasn't their fault because a movie that had been announced wound up either not coming out or getting released under a different title or something like that. Or getting, you know, never made it past development hell. So let's see what we got here. I've never heard of Hercules in the Conquest of Atlantis, ever. But it could have turned into another movie, I don't know. Gulliver's Travels was made. Tarzan. I don't know my Tarzan movies like I should. I'm sure someone out there knows whether this one was made. Tarzan the Magnificent. 12 to the Moon, I absolutely do know. That was made. That was pretty good. That was pretty good for a pre-moon landing in real life space movie. 12 to the Moon was pretty good. Journey to the Seventh Planet was actually made. Journey to Venus was not, unless it came out under a different name. 18 Visits to Mars absolutely was not made, unless they renamed it. Yeah, a lot of these didn't happen. At least not under these titles. The Maid and the Martian, Take Me to Your Leader. No. Nope. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that this intended movie title was Diary of a Mummy, not Dairy of a Mummy. I hope it's not a dairy of a mummy. If it is, the service is going to be really slow. Now I want to see a movie where there's a dairy run by a mummy. Let's make that happen. The Amazing Colossal Man, yep. They're calling this The Split, but it's clearly from the movie we know as The Manster. Oh, this is a pretty generic title, The Vampire. You probably figure there's been like 10 movies called The Vampire. But because of the year, 1957, I actually do know this one. In the 1950s, almost all horror was science fiction horror. And even when they did a gothic monster like a vampire or a werewolf, they would have some pseudo-scientific explanation for it instead of a mystical explanation. And this movie was like that. This was a movie where there was a man who became a vampire, but there was a scientific explanation for the condition of vampirism. It was all right. Actually, a better one was, there was a similarly titled one, The Werewolf, where a man scientifically became a werewolf. That one was actually pretty good because the monster got a lot of screen time. The Lord High Minister of all that is sinister. The Laurie Story. This I recognize is from the movie Mad Love. Not sure which movie this is from. Maybe from Comedy of Terrors. Of course, I'm assuming if you're watching a video like this, you probably recognize, but just in case you don't, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre. Here's one of these many faces of Peter Lorre. Mad Love has been sort of overlooked. You can find this movie easily on YouTube or similar places, but it's not one that every monster fan is familiar with, but it's absolutely worth seeing. If you've never seen this movie, Mad Love, starring Peter Lorre, and you're a fan of classic monsters and vintage horror, you absolutely should check it out, mostly for one specific scene. And I won't spoil it, but you will absolutely know what scene I'm talking about when you see it. That is so creepy. Now, oh, and this is from Mad Love. Yep. Okay, well, a bit of a spoiler. This is from the scene that's so creepy. Okay. So this came out in the 60s. If you wanted to know what movies Peter Lorre had been in, like if you saw Mad Love on TV or something, and you wanted to follow up what other movies Peter Lorre had been in, you couldn't easily look that up. There was certainly no internet. Your best chance of finding out what movies Peter Lorre had been in would be if a magazine like this published a filmography of him. You know, if you wanted to know tonight what movies Peter Lorre was in, you would just Google it. This was a treasure of information if you were a movie fan back in the 60s, because you wouldn't be able to find this out otherwise. And then what you would do is you would look through your weekly TV listings, and see if any of these movies were coming up and were going to be shown on TV in the week ahead. Forey Ackerman finds the Lost World, but of course this is The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Lost Continent. Rare still from Mystery of Life, a pterodactyl, a bird as big as an elephant. Wow. This is Forey talking about seeing the Lost World. I can still remember, across a span of nearly 40 years, how out in front of the downtown theater that was featuring The Lost World, they had to the left of the box office a model brontosaurus. Yeah, they did used to do good publicity gimmicks for movies back in the day. This is from The Land Unknown. I like The Land Unknown, but even I will admit the dinosaurs were a lot cheaper here. A lot of it was mostly puppets and guys in costumes, as opposed to the stop motion dinosaurs that I think look way, way better. And any of those options comes across better than the live animal with a couple of appliances glued to it method, which they did in King Dinosaur here. Although, I must say, the movie King Dinosaur is also available to see on my other channel, my All Night Spook Show channel, if you do want to see that. Oh, this would have been a gold mine for a kid in the 60s. Checklist of caveman pics, paleo kicks, and dinosaur flicks. Wow. Okay, first of all, do you recognize what this is from? You really ought to. That's from King Kong, 1933 King Kong. That is not Kong, but this is from the movie King Kong. All right, so let's see. Yep. 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 Yeah, see, they're getting Godzilla and Gorgo in here. I'm not sure do those really count as dinosaur movies? I don't know. Rodan. And the monster that challenged the world is not any kind of a dinosaur. It's a giant mutated mollusk. There's no, like 1 million BC, sure, absolutely. That's a caveman or dinosaur movie, sure. But a lot of these, oh well. Lon Chaney shall not die. Lon Chaney was famously billed as the man of 1,000 faces. He did his own makeup and made all kinds of amazing faces, including the one on the cover here. Oh, special preview of Tales of Terror. Tales of Terror is an anthology movie, but all the stories are Edgar Allan Poe stories. And although this looks kind of grisly here, this is actually played for laughs. This scene is actually played for laughs. This was from a dream sequence in the movie where the bad guys are playing with the severed head of the guy that they've killed. Yikes. Oh, that's from the Morella part. Yep. I think you can probably guess which Edgar Allan Poe story they're doing here. You know, The Cask of Amontillado is such a grim, skin-crawling story. I can't imagine why they chose that one to play for laughs in this movie. It mystifies me why they would do that. I mean, if they could have made it so creepy easily, they wouldn't have to work hard at it. The story, tells itself. And the M. Valdemar story, they actually did as more of a straight-up horror story. John Carradine. John Carradine was one of these actors who, even if the movie was truly terrible, he would make it look good because his performance was good. His voice was so deep and authoritative and dramatic. This is from Voodoo Man. Revenge of the Zombies. This is a publicity still from it, although a scene like this did happen in the movie. Oh, The Black Sleep. Yeah. What did you guys think of when John Carradine played Count Dracula? He played Count Dracula a few times. In House of Frankenstein and in House of Dracula. And also in a couple of other movies that were not nearly as good as House of Frankenstein or House of Dracula. Billy the Kid versus Dracula. And there was one more too. What the heck was that other one called? It was truly awful. It was the one where Dracula was retired. He and his wife were retired. This was a later one. This is from like the 60s, the Cosmic Drive-In era. What was that movie where John Carradine played Dracula and he and his wife were retired and their younger relatives were the ones causing the problems? It was like a horror comedy. It was terrible. But John Carradine himself, I don't think was ever terrible in anything. Yeah. Invisible Man's Revenge, yeah. Captive Wild Woman. Yikes. Oh, you can get Son of Famous Monsters and Famous Monsters Strike Back. Huh? Okay. I told you there was something I was going to say about Return of the Fly. As far as I know, Return of the Fly is the only horror franchise film where the original film was made in color, but the sequel was made in black and white. Because the original The Fly, of course, was a color film, and this one was shot in black and white. I really don't know what the reason was. It was cheaper to film in black and white, I do know that, but I don't know what made them think to do this. In this one, the son of the original scientist has the same thing happen to him. He's crossed with a fly. I actually prefer this fly design to the one from the first movie. I like the oversized head. In the first movie, the fly's head was the proportions of a human head. This one looks more otherworldly to me. I'm not saying it's as good a movie as The Fly. Of course not. It's certainly not. But I do like this fly design. More Forrest J. Ackerman puns. Let me call you SWAT Heart. You too can be a human fly. Just slip on this ready-made fly head and fool the gang. They'll die laughing. Imagine trying to act wearing this. Okay, Glenn Strange was a large stuntman and actor who had been in a lot of cowboy films. And he'd also been in a couple monster movies like The Mad Monster. And he got the gig as the Frankenstein monster in the last leg of the classic Universal monster movies. So he played the Frankenstein monster in 3 movies: House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And the look of Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster was very publicized during the era of Monster Kids from 57 to 65. All kinds of monster merchandise had the look of the Glenn Strange version of the Frankenstein monster on it. So that by the time my era, the second wave of Monster Kids, came along in the 70s, this was the image of the Frankenstein monster that was big in pop culture. And no, I'm not saying that Glenn Strange performed the role as well as Boris Karloff or anything like that. I'm just talking about the recognition that his image had as the Frankenstein monster. Here's the other monster he played. Petro, the Mr. Hyde type monster in The Mad Monster. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. You know, people have in mind that Bela Lugosi played Dracula in a bunch of movies. He played Dracula in a bunch of stage shows. That's true, in a bunch of plays. But in movies, he only did it twice. In Dracula in 1931, and in this movie, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948. And here's Glenn Strange as the monster. Okay, I've mentioned this in other videos, but Lou Costello from the comedy team, Abbott and Costello, hated the idea of doing this Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So when they did the publicity pictures from it, he was completely phoning it in. He wasn't playing along at all. And you can find a lot of publicity pictures from this movie where he's just standing there. Yes, Glenn Strange was a mad monster and a bad monster. You're not wrong. Oh, Dante's Inferno. Actually, when my oldest son was a teenager, he found this movie online and introduced me to it. I had never seen it. Aw, come on. Are these the 50 worst horror films ever made? Joe Dante Jr., who's seen more than his share of monster movies, thinks so. With very few exceptions, your editor is inclined to agree with him. How many would you assign to the eternal flames of the brimstone pit? Okay, what are they going to list as the worst one? Oh, well, Frankenstein's Daughter. Okay. You know, in all fairness, the guy who designed the monster, they never told him it was supposed to be a female monster. He was just doing a generic Frankenstein monster. And when he found out it was horror, that it was supposed to be a female monster, he just slapped some makeup on. And because he didn't have time to come up with anything better. So it's not entirely his fault. He wasn't told what the mission was. Okay, so let's see what they've got here for worst movies. Adventure Island, I don't even know. Haunting We Will Go was a very unfunny Laurel and Hardy comedy. I don't know that one. Amazing Transparent Man. Okay, that's fair. Attack of the 50-Foot Woman is bad. The Blob. Oh, come on. The Blob's not that bad. The Brain Eaters was fairly bad. That was fairly bad. And they were not really brain eaters. They were parasites that would go into a person's body and take over their brain. They just gave it the lurid title of the Brain Eaters. Bride of the Monster, absolutely. That's terrible. The Cat Creeps is not terrible. Cry of the Werewolf. The Cyclops is not great, I'll grant you that. I wouldn't say it's this bad. Devil Girl from Mars. Fire Maidens of Outer Space is actually okay if you like ridiculously cheesy over-the-top science fiction from the 50s, because that's what you get there. I can see why people would say it's among the worst, but it's enjoyable in my view. Frankenstein's Daughter, yeah, okay. Genius at Work. Giant from the Unknown. Gigantus, the fire monster. That was the second Godzilla movie. Look, Godzilla and Anzilla. Triangulus. The Girl from Scotland Yard, I don't know. The Dragon. Have Rocket Will Travel. The Hideous Sun Demon. Okay, that's fair. How to Make a Monster? It's not that bad. Invasion of the Saucermen. I love the Saucermen design. The Paul Blaisdell Saucermen design. I just love it. Oh, come on. I was a teenage Frankenstein and I was a teenage werewolf? No. King of the Zombies. Okay, I'm getting my blood pressure rising here now. I like a lot of these films. Feature version of the serial King of the Rocket Men. Okay, I can understand that. Whenever they took a movie serial and made a feature film version of it, they would have to edit out tons of stuff, and it would always come out choppy. Yeah, I never liked Mad Doctor of Market Street. I agree with him on that. That's not so good. The Mad Monster. That's my favorite George Zucco performance. Making me mad here. Missile to the Moon. In Missile to the Moon, the astronauts encounter, among other things, a giant spider on the moon. And when I was 5 years old, my parents let me watch this movie on TV. And I was so terrified of the giant spider that for years, I thought there was a giant moon spider living in our house. And it was going to get me if I wasn't careful. And when I grew up and became an adult monster kid and started writing my own horror books, one of my stories is Mourner's Web, where I have the monsters are the Jabba Fofi, gigantic man-eating spiders of the Congolese basin, and they're based mostly on the giant spider from Missile to the Moon. So there. Monster from Green Hell is not great. The Mummy's Curse. Yeah, that's the final of the Universal Mummy movies, unless you count the Abbott and Costello one. The Final 15 Fizzlers. All right, let's see if these ones make me mad. Mysterious Doctor. Night of the Blood Beast is pretty bad. Plan 9 from Outer Space, okay. Revolt of the Zombies, She Demons is not great. The Smiling Ghost, okay. It's low budget. I'm not sure where you get SOS Coast Guard. That's not a genre film. Teenage Caveman, yeah. 12 to the Moon was a feeble grade B melodrama with a message of brotherly love. Oh my gosh. Two Lost Worlds. The Unknown Terror. Okay. Rodan. Really? The Woman Eater. I don't know what that is. I might know it by a different name. The Woman Eater. Weak little British work from Columbia in '59 concerning a carnivorous plant. No, I don't know that one at all. Zombies on Broadway is kind of funny. I like Zombies on Broadway. It's not great. It's interesting because Zombies on Broadway, it was like an Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, but for a much lesser known pair of comedians. In fact, they made like 4 movies, and this was by far the biggest movie they ever made. By far. They were not very well-known comedians, but they did get Bela Lugosi in this. And it's all right. Zombies on Broadway, man. That's the worst movie you've ever seen. If Zombies on Broadway is the worst movie you've ever seen, I've got a whole other list I can give you. I could easily list, another 50 that are all worse than Zombies on Broadway. Okay. I think that's the first time I've ever read a Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine article that actually angered me. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments. Do you agree with or disagree with that list? You tell me what you think. Okay. Ooh, monster rings. Okay. Ants, real ones too, in their own ant farm. 100-piece Army and Navy set. These were flat stand-up figures. They weren't the three-dimensional plastic soldiers that a lot of us had as kids. Yeah, sometime I gotta find this one shot on eBay somewhere. I keep meaning to get this. It's a one shot they made with a double feature, two big Hammer films, Curse of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula. I want to track that down. Ooh, you can buy the Mad Scientist Laboratory. Be a mad scientist in your own lab. You know, my wife is a scientist. She's a research scientist. I should take a screenshot of this and text it to her and ask if this is how she got her gig. She just loves when I make mad scientist jokes. Not really. Be a mad scientist this easy way. Over 100 experiments. Completely harmless. No heat or flame used. Okay, given the choice, who in the world would order a mask that they've just drawn what they want you to think it looks like, as opposed to a mask where they show you what it actually looks like in a photograph? Of course you're going to get the one where you can actually see what the real mask looks like. You know, this is something we take for granted now. If you wanted to have a bunch of 8x10 glossies of monsters, you could just print them right now on your home printer. You couldn't do that in the 60s. It was a whole big deal. These were big sellers. This is actually pretty typical of the first wave of Monster Kids, and this is a good example of what separates their group from mine, the second wave of Monster Kids. Mine never would have thought these were very interesting because the Mummy didn't have a car, and Frankenstein's monster didn't have a car. We didn't get it the way that the first wave did. But anyway, they had the Mummy's chariot, Frankenstein's flivver, Dracula's dragster, and the Wolfman's wagon. And what you would do, see, was like you only had to buy the Dracula one, and the kid down the road bought Frankenstein's, and the kid across the street from him bought the Mummy's chariot, and then you would all get together and play outdoors like children used to do, and you would have monster vehicle races. I wish I could tell you that this turned out to be a scam or a trick of some sort. Unfortunately, this is 100% true. They really were selling live monkeys by mail order. This is actually good. The movie Vampire Bat was never actually a lost film, but it was a very, very obscure film that by the time this magazine came out, few people had seen. So the fact that you could send away and get it by mail is actually a really good deal. Now you can see it easily online. In fact, it's on my All Night Spook Show channel. But at the time this magazine came out, that would have been quite a find. Do you really want to mail order a human skeleton? Try explaining that to your parents when that arrives in the mail. Monster fly. That's really creepy. This is another great example of something the first wave of monster kids would have got, and my group wouldn't. A 2-foot tall, big Frankie monster. But see, it looks almost like what we would call a super deformed figure with a gigantic head. Ew, gruesome skull cup. Wow. Perpetual motion solar engine. Wow. I think I would have bought How to Have a Spook Show in Your Own Home. Yep. Oh, you can do, from the Addams Family TV show, you can do Uncle Fesser's light bulb trick. Oh, and also from the Addams Family, there's The Thing. Huh. Professional, custom, hand-painted Hollywood masks. Oh, there's the mole people again we were looking at earlier. Huh. Was this, in fact, the best issue ever? You tell me. Listen, if you're a fan of classic monsters and vintage horror, you should check out my book series, the Mourners Woods books. I'm self-published on Amazon. I've written a series of novels all set in the haunted forest, Mourners Woods. In each book, there's a completely new cast of characters and completely new monsters. What the books all have in common is the location, Mourners Woods. My name again is Paul Edwards. Thanks for spending some time reading Famous Monsters of Filmland's 1966 yearbook with me. This was pretty good. I'll see you in Mourners Woods.